This episode is proudly supported by Powerhouse Parramatta.
Powerhouse Parramatta will open in 2025. The new museum will be the largest in New South Wales and is determined to offer the very best in hospitality. Perhaps your business can be part of defining a food and beverage offering which is expected to cater to 2 million visitors a year. This incredible opportunity for operators includes retail food and beverage, in-house residential catering, events and other hospitality ventures, encapsulating the diversity of cuisines and cultures that make Western Sydney so exciting. Interested to learn more? Powerhouse invites food and beverage operators to a briefing on Tuesday, 8th of August. For more information and to register for this exclusive briefing, go to powerhouse.com.au.
I've had to work 7 days for quite some period of time, trying to get everything back on track, post-pandemic, but I enjoy it. I love what I do, Anthony, and I always have done. I mean, I've been cooking since I was 14 years of age. I wouldn't know what else to do, to be honest with you.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. In part 2 of our chat with Simon Sandall, he tells us about building the Aria brand with Matt Moran, the creation of Boronia Kitchen, and the day that changed his life forevermore. Do you have any stories of those sort of first interactions with Matt Moran that sort of swayed you to get on board for the Aria project?
Oh, look, you know what? Me and Matt are very alike. We have similar humours and, there's probably a lot of stories I can tell, and there's probably a lot of stories but mate, we and even to this day, we're very good friends, and I've got a lot of time for Matt, and a lot of people, I know, look at people like Matt and they judge him, but Matt's one of the loveliest guys I know. He's very loyal, he's very respectful, he's very generous, which I've always respected with Matt, how generous he is. He's a lot of fun, but at the same time, he's a business owner, and he'll put you in his place when you have to. So, Matt's come from nothing and worked his way up, and mate, if you can't respect people that, just go out and have a crack at it, it's you've got to respect. I mean, me personally, anybody that has a go, I have the biggest admiration for them. You know what I mean? And Matt came from nothing, and he's built himself a small empire, and I have the biggest admiration for that. That can be so. But there was some funny stories. I mean, I worked in the early days, on the line with Matt, and I spent a lot of time cleaning up after him, which I'm sure he'll have a laugh and a joke when he hears this. But there was in the early days we had this pastry chef called Sylvain, and he was a French guy, and I learned a lot about desserts and pastries. Desserts and pastries, and taught me a lot about balance in pastry, because he brought, which I hadn't seen in my career, he brought a lot of acidity levels to pastry, and in the early days it was just sweet on sweet on sweet, and and for that reason I probably never really enjoyed eating them. So he taught me a lot about balance in desserts, but he was also a comedian. And we used to have a lot of fun, and we used to get flogged in them early days. We'd do like 600 covers a day, Aria. And I can remember, one time where, he'd do things like he'd come up, in the middle of service, and me and Matt would be, either on the meat or the fish, cooking away, playing away, and Sylvain would walk up in the busiest point, and he would have just squeezed a sponge over his head, because he could see how wet me and Matt were, and he'd walk up and he'd have this, squeeze this sponge over his head, and he'd like walk up to us both and he'd look at us and go, do you need a help? Do you need a hand, or do you need a cloth, or something? It's just, you know, he would go up and pat Matt's forehead, you know, and he's just like, I won't tell you what we said, but it was, you know, we'd laugh about it. It was just, you know, there was one time, and this is hysterical. Matt's the hood range went down, and we couldn't work out what was going on. And it was at the end of the night, and Matt's on the stove looking at the hoods, working out what's going on. So Sylvain turned around to his first year apprentice and said, "Can you take this bucket of hot soapy water and go and give it to Matt? He wants to clean the hoods." He walks up to Matt and goes, "Here, chef, here's some hot soapy water." Right? To clean. Matt never cleaned the hoods. So Matt's just looked at him and gone, and we're pissing ourselves. Oh, we're dying with laughter. Absolutely dying. And, you know, I won't tell you what Matt said, but it was, you know, it's just, you know, the things that, you know, the laugh and the jokes that you had, and, you know, yes, we were all working extremely hard and, you know, and enjoying it. You know, it was a lot of fun. But it was just the things like that sort of, you know, put a smile to you at the end of the day, you know what I mean?
Aria is one of the most influential restaurants in Australia's history now, and you were there from the beginning. Do you have any stories of the challenges and sort of what it took to sort of bring it up to that level and receive so many accolades?
Oh, look, it's hard work, you know, and I think you know, it's hard work is probably the most favourable word. You know, it's not something. I mean, the problem is, you know, I know there's a problem, but you know, in them days, it was, the culture was that you worked and worked and worked to get it right, and failure wasn't an option. You know, there was a lot of sweat, pain, and tears that, you know, that went on to, you know, look, we made mistakes. You know, I made a lot of personal mistakes myself, you know, and with Aria, you know, I can remember when, you know, I can't remember what year it was, but when we went down from 2 chef's hats to 1 chef's hat. I mean, that was, I can tell you now, was my personal responsibility. But at the same time, what it did, I can remember sitting at home waiting, because I never got an invite to the Good Food Awards in them days. Well, I just never got an invite. You know, but, you know, you're waiting for the phone call, you're waiting to see what the results were. And you know, and I thought, this is taking a bit long. And, you know, I eventually got the message that we'd lost the chef's hat. And I can tell you now, I had tears in my eyes. I was absolutely devastated. You read the review and, you know, you can't help but take it personal, especially when it's something that you've done yourself. But there was also a time where it changed my life and changed my career and made me more disciplined. And I thought I was pretty disciplined at that particular point in time. But, you know, I remember doing this entree at Aria and you know, look, we had pressure points where you're constantly trying to, you know, as everyone's in the industry, you're constantly trying to evolve and come up and create and do new things. And, you know, this one time I did something and I knew in the back of my mind it wasn't right. And this particular time, you know, that I did it and, you know, let it go out, and it happened to be a food reviewer. And, you know, I paid the price for letting it go. And, you know, and it was I suppose the time after that and ever since now, you know, if I do something that, if I have any doubt whatsoever, and this is what I try and teach my guys now, you know, never be afraid to create food. But first and foremost, have the discipline in the back of your mind. If you've got any doubt whatsoever that it doesn't feel right, generally it's not right. So don't just serve it for the sake of putting a special on or, you know, thinking that you're the new best thing. If it doesn't feel right, don't serve it, because it will at some point bite you in the ass, and my discipline's from that, and this is for me personally. I mean, look, we're in the restaurant game and you can't please all the people all the time, but my discipline from that, I think, has made me a better cook, because if I doubt that, I don't put it on, and I will pull it at the last minute.
Tell us about your cooking then. The Aria pushed so many boundaries. What was it like creating dishes, and what was your approach during that era for Aria?
Oh, look, I mean, food is something that you're, like I say, it's constantly evolving. You look into your peers, you look into where you're dining out, you're looking to what's around you to get that inspiration. Even now, it's just a constant evolution. I don't think I could ever sit down and yes, there comes a point where you do sit down and you put pen to paper, but for me, it's an evolution. You're constantly thinking about it, you're constantly looking, and I mean, look, with the exposure of, social media and stuff, whether you think it or not, you are constantly absorbing stuff that gives you ideas, So in the early days, it was, looking, obviously, taking stuff that you've learnt over the years and reinventing them. I don't think, yes, there's a few people out there that do reinvent the wheel. But, a lot of it's your training and you're deriving stuff that's, been a derivative of stuff that you've already learnt, you know what I mean, and turning it into something new. And, you might, look, me personally coming to Australia, there was all these, products that, and especially seafood that I hadn't seen before, and the quality of seafood. So, that on its own was, massive for me, because it was, so much more abundant than what I was seeing in the UK. And look, now, there's certain products that when I go back to the UK, I look forward to trying and getting hold of, and things like turbot, halibut, you know what I mean? So it's, so it's just a constant evolution. I'm to be honest with you.
Your role with Aria and the group expanded quite dramatically in your time there, looking after multiple venues, including one that's made a huge impact, Chiswick. Tell us about that expansion of your role.
Yeah, well, it sort of changed when, Matt sort of took over Opera Bar, and then we took over what used to be Opera Point Events at the Sydney Opera House. And I can, I was at a point in my career, to be honest, where I was like, am I done at Aria? Have I done my time? I think I was up to about 6 or 7 years at that particular point. And, I just needed a little bit of something else. And I can remember them sort of, talking about, doing the catering at the Opera House. And I was like, don't do it, guys, don't do it. And anyway, I ended up somehow getting talked into going over to the Opera House and, building Aria Catering, which again became, a phenomenal business. And then sort of jumping in and helping to build Opera Bar and, get some structure in place there. And I suppose really that's where my role just sort of naturally gravitated into this group role with Morsel at the time, and then they started looking at the old Prunier site in Woollahra, which now is sits as Chiswick, and and I can remember doing tastings at Opera Bar, and Matt and Bruce used to sit down and, they'd be eating the food and they'd be going, oh, this is the new one. This is the new one. And for a while I didn't know anything about it. And then, Chiswick sort of got born, and, and it was this whole garden narrative and, this beautiful restaurant. And, that was, and to this day, I'll be very honest, Chiswick is one of my favourite restaurants in the whole of Sydney. I love going there. I love the feel of it. It's just, looking out onto the gardens and stuff. It's an incredible business, incredible restaurant. And, I suppose because I actually worked at Boronia as well, helping Michael Moore at some point. So, seeing, and that was just helping out for a few weeks here, there and everywhere because, I had a relationship with Michael from the Opera House days. Seeing it sort of grow into this amazing business to what it is today, and it just goes from strength to strength. So, and as does Aria. So, I do sit back and feel very proud of, being a part of that original team of, the creation and building it to where it is now. And, and as I do with, places like North Bondi Fish and River Bar, because, my role sort of grew into, building them and Aria Brisbane and, the River Bar and all that sort of stuff. And, it was a massive, massive experience for me. And it was something I enjoyed, at the highest level, building all them great relationships with, staff and suppliers and creating some amazing restaurants.
Being involved with the likes of creations of the likes of Chiswick and North Bondi Fish, and did it change your approach to cooking?
Do you know what it taught me? It taught me how to be. It taught me how to change. I think a lot of people are afraid of changing. Having said that, I think the pandemic has taught everybody in the world that, don't rest on your laurels and change is good. I'm a big believer in being able to be a little bit more diverse. So, going from 2 hats at Aria and then to the Opera House and, doing the catering and then to Opera Bar. Opera Bar is just a phenomenal business. And the food that we used to pump out of that, at a very high quality was phenomenal. So what it taught me is that how to be a little bit clever with, how you present a menu, how you build that menu, what you put on the menu, so that it's not just slaughtering the back of house to be able to produce it. Thinking on your feet and being able to be a little bit, and I suppose in a sense diversifying what I was doing from 2 Hut Food to then going to the catering, and it taught me a lot. But it was a lot of self-learning and thinking on my feet very quickly, So, I love being thrown in the deep end. I think, for me personally, I'm a better person, when I'm being thrown in the shit. I can think on my feet very quickly, and I can react very quickly. I love solving problems as opposed to causing problems. So it's and then going to Chiswick and I suppose, look, Chiswick, a lot of the Chiswick food, to be honest, actually started in my kitchen at home. And through little snippets of tastings and stuff, because Chiswick was very sort of, that sharing culture and, very sort of just fresh and just good, honest, home-cooked food, which I enjoy. I enjoy cooking. I love eating, so that's where the whole Chiswick thing sort of, and then Pete Sullivan sort of came up with the garden narrative and, and it sort of just gradually sort of, built into what it is today, and it's, like I said before, it's a phenomenal place to go eat and work, to be honest. So, yeah.
Tell us about the decision to leave that world and open a restaurant in the suburbs of your own.
Oh, look, Morsel and Solotel sort of merged together. My role grew even bigger. I think I was looking after about 26 venues. have, I think it was about nearly 400 and 500 staff, kitchen staff underneath me. I had at that point, I think it was about 4 group chefs. So I was, managing a lot of people. And it got to a point, whilst I enjoyed it, and again, there was lots of learning curves and, and so on. And, it was, I was still working. I sort of used to laugh that, I'm the only chef in the group that works, 16 hours a day that doesn't have a kitchen. You know what I mean? So, but at the same time, I enjoyed it. It was a very enjoyable time, but it just got to a point where I wasn't cooking, and there was a part of me I felt a little bit empty, and I just thought, what, I think I was about 43, 44 at the time, and I just went, what, yes, they pay me a shitload of money, and yes, I enjoy it, but there's this emptiness of, because all I'm doing is managing people, which some people like that, and some people will naturally gravitate to that as they get older. But for me, the food I wasn't getting as much engagement with food as I was prior to that. And I just went, what, if I don't jump ship now, as I get older, I'm going to have a red dot on my forehead because, it's a salary that they might want to at some point get rid of. I don't know. There was lots of things going through my head at that particular point. And I just went, what, I've got to do something about this. I can't sit here thinking about it and it playing on my mind. So behind the scenes, I, refinanced my house and set up ABMs and, I didn't tell a soul about it. Not even my close friends, only my wife, because, I knew how connected Matt was, that if it got out, there could be other ramifications. So I kept it really tight. And then one day, the day came that I had to make that, that call. And I can remember parking at the Sydney Opera House, and I've never told Matt this, I don't think anyway, but I came walking out through the car park, and I've never felt so, I actually thought I was going to pass out. And I'd called Matt and said, mate, can we have a chat? And I think, from what he told me, he knew that was coming. And I think the conversation lasted about 8 minutes, or it did last 8 minutes. And he sort of, I've got to go. I goes, okay. And he goes, I've got to go and I've got to tell people. I was like, okay. And I was in shock for a few days, to be honest with you. I actually done it, and but the decision was final, regardless. There was no trying to convince me to stay. I'd come too far to stop. So the plan was, as soon as that sort of came public, the phone was going berserk. I decided basically what I was doing was setting up a consultancy business, and I thought, well, if I can do this for multiple events with Matt, why can't I do it for myself? So the word got out, business went berserk, and, I ended up consulting for numerous people around the city and, building, some other great venues. And then it sort of, but then that got to a point where that wasn't enough. And, I'd sort of engaged with Susan and Pete Sullivan to jump in on the consultancy business, because that sort of became a little bit bigger than Ben-Hur, that I couldn't do it all on my own. So we went from Pete, Susan, then we brought Jane, this human resources person in, then we brought a marketing person in. So things were growing, but still in the back of my mind, I was like, I want a restaurant. I want to get back into it. Whilst this was fun and it was, diverse, and I was traveling up north and I was traveling, wherever over Sydney, it was just something I just needed something for myself. So sort of went on the hunt for different spots, and we'd moved over to we'd moved over to Hunters Hill, Gladesville area, and we were renting on. I'd moved into East Ryde at this particular point in time, and all my kids went to Boronia Park Public School, and I'd drop them off every morning at school, and there was this place across the road called Il Bolognese, and it was an old Italian restaurant. And I used to look at it, go, how the hell does this place stay alive? Because I never saw anybody in it. And I was just, and then I sort of did a bit of research, and, the family had it for like 42 years. So I'm sort of thinking to myself, well, they must own the land, because, they wouldn't be paying anything. Because I'm trying to do the numbers of how it all stayed alive, and I'd watch, and I'd have a little sticky, what's going on as I'm dropping the kids off or picking them up or whatever I was doing. I talked to my wife about it, and then one day, Tracy came home and said, there's a full lease sign on Il Bolognese. And I was like, right, awesome. So I goes, did you get the number? So I rang the number, and I spoke to this guy called Ernie, and I said, mate, I see that you've got Il Bolognese up for lease. And he said, oh, no, it's just, we have, but it's just the left-hand side where their old function room was. And I was like, that's shit. I said, all right, well, I said, it doesn't matter. He goes, oh, why? What did you want to do? And I said, well, I want to build a restaurant. I want to reinvigorate the whole space. I said, he goes, oh, yeah, they just want retail in there. No, you can't do food. And I said, oh, all right, we'll leave it then. He said, well, no, hang on a sec. Let's not just end the conversation. The family that owned it, they sold it to some property guys, and and he's just leasing it, and his lease runs out this. And he said, let me have a chat to him, see if he'll sell it. And I was like, okay. Just left it at that, and I think a couple of days later, he came back and he said, mate, guy's prepared to sell it. And I was like, cool. And I goes, how much? And he said a price, and I was like, Annie, come on, man, you're a smart guy. We all know it's not worth that. I said, and he's only got a couple of years left on it. So we had a bit of banter and built a relationship, and over the coming weeks, we managed to do a deal. And I suppose the rest is history. Yeah.
What have you loved about building your own restaurant in a community in the suburbs after a career in the CBD?
Oh, mate, do you know what? It was, I got all excited, and, I was like, the great thing, look, you look at Boronia from the street level, and you see the right-hand side, and you see it's got this old-fashioned shop front, and it looks amazing. If it was just the standalone building on its own, I wouldn't have touched it, because, as we all know, restaurants is a numbers game. Regardless of what we cook in there, if the numbers don't stack up, there's no point, because and even more so in this market where things are hard, costs of goods, labour, and all that sort of stuff. I would have never touched it. What excited me about Boronia was we've got 21, 22 car park spaces out the back. I ended up building a garden, and then we've got a building to the left-hand side, which is what they wanted to lease originally. So it was a big space. So I knew in the back of my mind that there was growth, right? So initially, when you're setting up any business, that you've got a budget, and, we didn't quite have the budget to do both sides. So we were running the consultancy out of the left-hand building, and, we built this beautiful space, because we literally, apart from the four walls, we had to take the roof off, we had to gut the whole inside, and we put a lot of money into it. So there was all these designs and and processes that we're going through, and the normal stresses of doing a business, which, regardless of how many businesses you've opened, and I've opened up a lot over my career, Anthony, they're still there. You know, you still have the same anxieties and all that sort of stuff. But what was a real game changer for me, Anthony, we opened up in June 2018. Obviously the build and the development was, you know, we were doing that, you know, a year before. On February the 18th, February the 14th, is it Valentine's Day? I should know that. I collapsed at home and thought I was having a heart attack. And it was, you know, I've come from that lifestyle of, you know, hospitality culture in the city, and, you know, and I thought, you know, that I could still be drinking and carrying on like a pork chop, and I basically collapsed at home and thought I was having a heart attack. I had these abdominal pains. You know, I couldn't speak, and all my left-hand side went, and, you know, ambulance came, ended up rushing me off to ICU, and, you know, I basically was having a necrosing pancreatitis, which is basically where your pancreas starts to consume itself. So pancreatitis is quite common from, you know, poor lifestyles, drinking a lot. Necrosing is actually life-threatening, and, you know, I mean, to this day, the doctors can't believe that I actually survived it. So I've only actually got 20% of my pancreas left. I was put on, I was in ICU for a few weeks, and I was put on 8 of the highest opioids known to man, tripping, hallucinating. You know, I lost, I think in, you know, 2 weeks of being hospitalised, you know, in the ICU, I lost 18 kilos just through, you know, not eating and, you know, taking all these opioids. And, you know, in that time, Susan, you know, we were designing, but we hadn't signed the lease. And then Susan came to me and, you know, said, look, you know, you need to sign this. I can't do this without you. Signed the lease in intensive care for Boronia. Look, do you know what? I sort of take my hat off to Susan and, you know, her, you know, commitment to me and the loyalty to me, and you know, I'm forever grateful for her taking that, you know, that leap of faith that I was even going to come out alive, to be honest with you. You know, to going into business with Boronia. So, you know, and then, you know, eventually sort of got out of hospital, and, you know, I was on a lot of drugs for a long time, and I think, because I know you came into the restaurant in the early days, I was on a lot of opioids at that time. You know, my head wasn't probably in the best of spaces. It was, you know, it took a long time to, you know, get off them. Which, you know, anybody, you know, we've all heard what these things do to you. I eventually got off them. And I can remember it was the 18th. That's where the 18th was getting confusing. On the 18th of November, I got the all clear from my doctor to start training. And I needed something, because, you know, to go from, you know, that lifestyle, you know, and having a cellar at home, and, you know, just having the access to all these fine wines and fine food and all that sort of stuff, and being told you can't eat fatty foods and you can't never drink alcohol again. Well, you can, but you run the risk of not waking up one day. You know, I that night at home when it all happened, you know, I said goodbye to 3 of my kids. You know, that. No, I'll be honest, I'm choking up talking about that, but, you know, it's not something that you want to do in life, trust me. You know, when you're saying goodbye to your kids because you don't think you're going to survive, it's pretty epic. You know, so, you know, it was challenging, you know, so, mate, being told that you can train and you can do something, you know, and it was that was life changing. The fact that I survived, you know, I had a very, very, very good friend of mine, you know, that sort of helped get me through all this. And a guy called Ben Doyle, he's very close mate, and you know, I owe a lot to this guy for mentally sort of, you know, helping me through everything. And as I do my wife as well. My wife was fucking incredible, to be honest with you. You know, so it took a while. So, but then I learned a new vice, and you know, I suppose reinvented myself. You know, this is who I've got to be. I've been given a second chance to, you know, be here, and you know, Boronia has sort of become my look, it was always my pride and joy, but it's become more of my pride and joy, and you know, it's a massive part of my life, and so is exercise now. You know, I train at least 5 or 6 days a week. Got into a lot of Muay Thai. You know, I'd go and put myself on these, you know, I got into this Muay Thai, which is the Thai kickboxing, after I got a little bit, well, it's actually a funny story, because I was starting getting into it, and I was like, you know, I was still on the opioids and stuff, and I remember my head wasn't in the right space, and I remember seeing there's something on social media about these Muay Thai camps in Phuket, in the mountains of Phuket, and I can just remember booking it, and didn't have any accommodation, just booked the camp, booked my instructor twice a day, and different classes, and I think I booked it for about 11 days, and I told Susan a week out, and one of the guys in the manager, Anais, you know, I think she had overheard me saying I'm going to Thailand to this, doing some kickboxing, but I forgot to tell my wife, and yeah, I know, right? And she walked into the restaurant one day, and Anais turned around to her and said, "Aren't you a loving wife?" And she goes, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, you know, allowing your husband to go off to Thailand." And she goes, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Going off to do the kickboxing." And I wasn't around. And so Tracy's left all completely confused and bewildered. And I can remember getting home that night, and she turned around to me and she goes, "Have you got something to tell me?" I went, "No." You know, like what? And she goes, "Thailand?" I goes, "Oh, shit." And then everything resonated, you know, but I suppose why I'm saying it is my head was just, it was all over the place. So what it allowed me to do is go out, and I'd literally turn off all social media. I'd train for 7 hours a day. I'd run 10 kilometres, 10, 15 kilometres every day up the mountain. And it was like a boot camp to reboot myself. You know, I ended up going out there 5 or 6 times, getting into the mixed martial arts and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And, you know, I suppose the rest is history, in a sense of now is my culture is that, you know, and I need to every day is I have to train. I'm not boxing much, but, you know, I'm doing my physical exercise every day. I get up at 4:45, go and do an hour and a half training, and then come back, shower, and come to work.
You've had the most extraordinary career and changes in your life as well. What do you love about what you do?
Oh, look, do you know what? I love the food industry. You know, I love where Boronia is at. I love the fact that, I did make this choice to come to the suburbs, and whilst, you know, I feel bad for everybody in the city, and, you know, how it's impacted them and their lives. I'm very grateful that, you know, the timing of moving out here, because, you know, it's, you know, regardless of the pandemic, it's been a good time to open up a restaurant in the suburbs. I love Boronia. I love where it's going. You know, I love, you know, we knew there was a market for, you know, for small functions. So we then created Boronia next door. You know, I've always done the catering. It's been in my blood. You know, I've launched Boronia Catering. You know, my consultancy business is still going strong. which is Sandall and Co. So it's, my life's, I don't think whilst Boronia, I love Boronia, and I don't think if I just did Boronia, I'd be quite content. But the fact that we've got Boronia next door in the catering and, the bits and pieces I do with my consultancy business, it keeps my life quite diverse, and gives me the satisfaction that I need, but still being able to, I'm in the kitchen most days. I've had to work 7 days for quite some period of time, trying to get everything back on track, post-pandemic, but I enjoy it. I love what I do, Anthony, and I always have done. I mean, I've been cooking since I was 14 years of age. I wouldn't know what else to do, to be honest with you.
Well, Simon, it's an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear just a bit of your story. Congratulations on what you've built there. Please keep in touch, and we'll definitely have to catch up again soon.
Yeah, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, Anthony. Thank you.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.